So that's how I got through some of the long walks. Um, how are we going? We got the screen.
Yeah, it's up in the Robinson room and
Can you
people are there.
can you see? We just right now we're just testing to see if you're able to see my slides.
Let me check.
See if there's see beautiful flowers in front of a chapel on a hill. So Rob, on your pilgrimage route, tell me about that thin space and how it had to do with uh, wind as well.
We can't see, I can't see you or your.
All right, then that means it's not working. That says two.
And you're
Um,
logged into Zoom?
it's he needs to throw it to Zoom. He's throwing the
Oh, okay.
yeah. He just isn't right now getting my slideshow for whatever reason. Well, while we work on uh, making it so you all can see the slides, uh, I'm going to finish talking here with Rob. Okay, Rob, nice and loud. Talk to me about the Camino and thin spaces for you.
Yeah, one of the most important parts of our pilgrimage was how we started each day. Um, we had enough to do, but it was simple enough that we could accomplish it when we woke up, pack our bags up in our hostel, eat food, and get ready to walk for the day. We would normally wake up even before the sun would rise. You know, you hear people talk about the joy of waking up with the sun. Well, we found, Catherine and I found real joy in greeting the day with the sun. It's like we had already prepared to meet the day. And I don't know, in that time frame, it's quiet. There's a stillness in the countryside that we were walking through, or walking through different towns in Spain as they were continuing to wake up as well with our fellow pilgrims. So when I think of thin places on our Camino, on our pilgrimage, I think as much about time and space as a specific moment, which I think is one of the beauties of a pilgrimage like that.
Thanks, Rob. Um, so in the Presbyterian tradition, uh, we celebrate that uh, all spaces are sacred and all times. And so there's this, I would probably frame it as a paradox. Our conversation this morning is about thin spaces, while on the other hand, we want to affirm again and again that God is with you
Okay,
in
you're up.
thick places. Am I getting a
Yeah, the slides are up and they can see you.
well? How about them apples? Um, um, there's a paradox. We are we believe that God is with us in the valley of the shadow of death. Like that's why the psalm is so beloved, and the psalm has the other side of the paradox that there's a thin space, the green pastures, right? So the Psalm 3 is provides the paradigm for thick and thin places. So even the valley of shadow of death, thou art with me. So even in what we would consider a thick place or beautiful, um, uh, or excuse me, not particularly beautiful, God's with us. The psalmist though wants to celebrate and talk about like, yes, this is true, but there is this other thing, and when I'm there, there's a lot of peace. and he uses space and place, lying down in green pastures. So I believe, just like other mediums of grace, whether that's music, or art, or a relationship, or baptism, or communion, mediums of grace, that space can function that way as well, and that we need help. So through thick and thin spaces and places. All right, I'm going to share a little bit about if um, if if you are able to sit, it's actually kind of nice
Okay.
to have you safely at a distance. All right. Every time I feel the Spirit, this past summer, June 2022, I traveled along an ancient path. First traveled around 700 CE, and then the route that I used was first walked in 980, and it's actually a route that begins in Canterbury, England, and arrives or ends in Rome. It's 80 stages, the full route. It's 1,100 miles. I walked from Besançon, France, to Pont Saint Martin, Italy. It The Tuscany part apparently is very beautiful as well. Looking at the slide, you can see that took me through just the corner of Switzerland and through the Alps. It is divine, right? All right. It Excuse me. So I walked for 20 days. Approximately 14 miles a day. I had to walk one of the stages almost twice because I somehow got a message while in the middle of nowhere on the Rhone River. I got a message that I needed to get to a notary, and I'd almost gotten run over by an ibex right before that. So I thought Trisha had tuned in to felt through the cosmos, through the divine, that I almost died because of this ibex that jumped off of behind a tree, running from something else, and almost knocked me down a cliff into the river. No, what she wanted was for me to go find a notary. So I did, and that's partly why my mileage is a little bit longer than if you walked on the Via Francigena the whole time. I spent at least a mile a day lost, but that was good for me because while I did prefer to walk fast, I also would stop in the middle of a walk in a thin space and spend an hour taking pictures and picking flowers. I'm going to start us with this video here. Somebody let me know if you're getting audio.
And hoofing it, right? Come up the mountain, pretty good speed, and hoofing it, right? And the road went flat, but the Francigena went up this hill, and then I get right to the crest of it, and I'm like, castle! Yeah, so that's kind of the rewarding parts so far, is these like crazy little chapels or castle views.
So there were those very thin moments. But I also took pictures periodically of what was not particularly thin, of these where you could see 5, maybe even 10 miles of hay fields. And you're like, so that's my walk for today. And how to, in those times, also practice seeing thin spaces. So I'm going to jump back to the rest of that video where we talk about, or I look at some of those other things. Here we go.
These like crazy little chapels or castle views. Yep. How about them apples? And then there's other times you come around a corner and there's this. And you go, I'm gonna walk through a lot of fields, like for like 5 hours, just like walking through a field, watching farmers cut hay. I mean, it was awesome back there. Up here, though, it's gonna be hot.
Rob, you nodded on that second part about, so on your, Rob McAllister is sitting here with me, on your pilgrimage walk, not so inspiring. Is that, or is it, did it resonate with you?
Yeah, absolutely. The kind of middle section of the Camino is called the Meseta, which it means plateau, and it is, you are walking through barren farmland, a lot of brown, a lot of dust and dirt, and that's about it.
Oh my goodness.
And you might be able to see a straight path of what you'll be walking on, exactly like what you're saying, for the next stretch of time. And different pilgrims relate to it differently. Some people,
Right.
you don't want to judge another person's pilgrimage, each is their own. Some people hated it. Some people would take a bus and just kind of skip that section and get back to the beautiful mountains. Some people.
I'm gonna, because I'm not sure they can hear very well. I'm gonna recap that part real quick. It was, so Rob was sharing that on the Camino, in a large section on a plateau, Mesa, the dusty, long, tiring, and not particularly inspiring. And so, for some folks, that's something that you just totally bypass. I'm actually relieved or glad to hear stretches of that, of the El Camino, that are also a little more ordinary, because that was a huge part of the experience for me, is to, because most of it was, like, you're going to see pictures of, the glorious, but because we don't take pictures of where it's just kind of more dusty road or walking past. I mean, for me, a lot of mine was actually on like busy roads, walking past gas stations. In those longer stretches, there's also opportunity for growth. That's where we can be doing the work. When it's smooth sailing and it's easy, it's not a lot of conditioning, because the work is already being kind of done for us. There's this medium of grace that's giving you a lift up, and so then if that's where you are for this year, you stay in the space of thin spaces and elevated, and it's just easier. Well, then when you get to a thick space, you haven't done the conditioning, right? Also, it makes the thin not as sweet if that's the only space you know. But if you go on those long stretches, well, you have to try to figure out how to find the good and the beautiful and the truth and the divine without supplements, without as many mediums of grace, then you are fine-tuning. And you'll have the ability, hopefully, to, in general, see the divine and the spirit. So what I did in the thicker spaces, I picked flowers, which is, well, how thick is that then, Clay, if you were able to pick flowers? But when it's just you, like I would see maybe 3 farmers on a tractor over the course of 12 hours. You have to do a little bit of work. So when the poppies were in the wheat, I would say, I can't wait to show somebody this picture and say, this is a Rogue Rouge, because I was in France. Get it? So I'm showing a picture. The picking of flowers and the making of bouquets held me in it was a walking, animated time of prayer with God. So sometimes people will walk a labyrinth and pray. I didn't show there's the picture of the Rose Rouge. So sometimes people, like I said, will walk a labyrinth as a way of sustaining a prayer. What tools can we use when the mediums of grace are not as available to us? In this instance, this is a pretty helpful tool, right? Where you're able to walk along and see wildflowers everywhere. Now, when you're hiking in like a national forest or in a park, don't pick all the flowers, right? That's against the rules. But you have to know, like I said, I would see like 3 farmers, and as long as I wasn't picking their wheat, they were fine. And it was also like, okay, a guy picking flowers, walking through, my farm, because the paths did go through people's farm. Just, every now and then farmers do move the signs. It's like, okay, thanks, farmers. So here's just a few of those little bouquets. The flowers in France, which was that stretch, I walked about 70 miles. But the flowers there were just amazing, and just the variety. It was also about 90 degrees every day for a week there, so that was intense as well. This is probably my favorite little bouquet. When I call it a bouquet, it sounds even tougher as opposed to an arrangement. This is my favorite bouquet. I had just seen this farmer on the tractor, and I was like wandering around. I was like, I need more Queen Anne's lace. Although I don't know what they call it in France. I doubt they call it that. He smiled, and I had 1 piece of wheat, and I think he was okay with that. So then I took it and I stuck it in his wood pile. And with other bouquets, sometimes I would just leave it on a rock, or and people before me also would put some at chapel steps as this offering. But doing this, picking these flowers and walking with them, like I would walk with this and build this for like over an hour, sometimes more, was a way of staying, holding, or helping me stay in a thin space on the hot, dusty road. Being able to see the beautiful. It's a little hard to see, but that's the wood stack on the left there, where I'm hoping, what's a good name for a French guy? Francois. You found my bouquet for him.
Julian.
Yeah, Julian. All right. Um, uh, I'm going to come back to that slide. Um, all right. So I did have. Well, I need to show you one slide because I've got a beef to pick with this one, and I've talked about it before. This guy, this heifer. So I have been lost for at least an hour. The trails are not only are they not only are they not marked well, and not only do people remove signage, there's also a lot of different options that people have come up with over the last 1,300 years, and some of them are marked different directions. So I was super lost and hot and tired and thirsty, and it made sense to me at that time after I hadn't spoken a word to a single person all day to ask this cow for directions. Yes, and it was. I didn't like ask for complicated directions. It was either, so it was real. It was a reasonable thing, a reasonable request. It was like left or straight. And while it wasn't audible, I wasn't able to see. I'm pretty sure she was communicating left. So I went left for about another hour, and it got worse and further away from anything, and clear that I was being shifted north when I really needed to go west. So I had to turn back around and backtrack all the way, and that's when I took this picture, and we had a conversation about it. I guess I'm not quite sure that helps you all with thick and thin places, but maybe there's a different session for talking about laughter and comedy in the thick places. That that provided a little bit of levity to me to have this conversation with this cow, and so it didn't feel so thick. I'm still coming for you. All right. Here's what the Celts talk about. The Celtic spirituality talks about a thin space. I've been saying that, and I don't think we were live when I first talked about what a thin space is. So it's a term used to describe the spaces where the veil in between heaven and earth is lifted, where spaces that help us transcend. And some Celtic saying is that heaven is just 3 feet away. It's always just right there, and in those thin spaces, it's even closer. What I had not heard much about before was that the thin spaces were created in the beginning of the Christian faith in Ireland. That there was work done, that they prayed over the land, the space, before they built on it, that communities gravitated towards what were called the Green Martyrs on the Green Hills. Did you know this? Yeah, that their martyrdom, which is a different kind of martyrdom, was to give up their life to be in nature and to live the life of prayer, and that there was a nurturing of a space. So I think space can be conditioned in like conditioning a new space, but experientially, when we move into some of these places where people, like, the space carries their memories, their stories. The it's just there, in the walls or in the air, and I think going back to something we talked about at the beginning with time and space, one of the big contributor factors that makes it a medium for grace. This is I think important. Is scale. So when you look to the stars and you see billions of stars, when you look at the vastness of the Grand Canyon, or you're in the Alps and surrounded by peaks and glaciers, or moving to time when you're standing on the remains of a synagogue in Capernaum, in or Stonehenge, or you're walking this path. What that does with the scale part of that, whether it's over millenniums or space, the scale part of that engenders humility. So it makes us feel small, but if you do it right, in a good way, small. Not insignificant. In fact, it like conversations about sin and grace, feeling small actually makes it even more wonderful and beautiful that you're named as a child of God. And like you look up here, who are we that we are made a little bit lower than angels? Psalm 8. So the humility, engendering humility, is the foundation as well. This is good, I promise, for gratitude. You can't be prideful and grateful. So the humbling that happens when we are able to see space and time and its infinity, is what makes a space thin, or an experience thin. That's one example. So I'm going to check on Facebook, or if you'll check with the class down there to see if people have questions. Did you have anything that came up? A question, something that you want me to elaborate on?
Curious about what role you see ritual playing in both dense spaces and concept of pilgrimage.
Great. Hold on, I'm going to show this. Rob asked if how I see ritual factoring into the concept of thin spaces. This is a very short clip, but it works.
Feeling small.
That's how I felt most of the trip, whether it was the big open plains or in those peaks. So the significance of ritual in thin spaces. Thank you. I think kind of like where we started with the mediums of grace, ritual is another tool to help us into the experience of the divine that is already there. And we need those because we are continually, partially paying attention. Have you heard that? It's just like, we're continually giving part of our attention to everything, right? And so, a ritual is about a focusing, a lighting of a candle. Here's something that I'm doing in the space to help me focus on that space. For me, a ritual every day, especially when I'm walking, is a prayer of gratitude. Thank you, God, for this day, for all that is above me. And you stretch out. All that is below me, all that is before me, behind me, within me, around me. Thank you, God, for this day. Now, that is a time and space prayer. At least that's how I like to do it, because when all this what awaits, well, what's physically in front of me and all that's behind me, what has happened before me, and so thinking about um, the divine and being grateful for everything in time and space. The limitations of how we perceive dimensions, time, space, or what we're trying to do is to not be limited by a secular understanding of time and space. And I think whether you're agnostic or orthodox, there's a awareness that time is tricky, and it's that there's probably more to time than Chronos time. That there's some kind of overlap and that sort of thing. So similarly with spaces, there's overlap. There's something different, something than sacred. Okay, I'm gonna show just a couple more pictures. Roberto, will you see if anybody in the forum class has a question? Thank you. Good. I was making sure I'm not on my. Hang in here with me. All right. This is an example of how a literal storm can be incredibly beautiful. And it interestingly has to do with manipulating time to be able to see something beautiful and perhaps sacred in a space. All right? So hopefully everybody can see it. Here we go. Hold on. All right. This is from Vingen and Lautenbrunnen. Whoop, whoop. Whoop. There we go. Great. All right, what you got for me? Have any?
Did you hear James' question?
I did not. I can't hear a single thing, so I was waiting for
Oh.
some Rob to tell. What's the question?
Jane asked how you sustained yourself, like physically and spiritually. Food, shelter,
Yes.
etc.
Yes. Okay. That's a. Thank you for asking. So, the question about sustaining or sustenance and how to was able to make the journey. Some of you all know I have a torn meniscus. Prior to that trip, if I walked 50 yards, I'd be sore the next day. But I got trek poles. I did some therapy and had knee brace, and was ridiculously intentional about how I walked. And so that's part of how that's part of how I was able, I believe, to walk that far. I looked ridiculous. I've modeled that for some people. Just imagine somebody with their hips thrown way forward and basically speed walking, because I was trying to distribute my weight. So that was one of the ways I sustained myself. I ended up with knee braces on both knees. Every morning I would put a ton of Tiger Balm on, which is just to kind of relieve muscles, aches, and pains. About every day I would jump into a creek. and soak my legs. So in like freezing creeks, I would climb into the creek because, I mean, I was in pain like most of the time, and that would alleviate, just icing. So there was a good bit of things that I was doing to kind of push through it. I had to work really hard to stay hydrated. So I had a Camelback, and one of my ways that I do hiking, or if I'm doing distance running, or used to, is I'll drink a liter before I start. Go ahead and like a camel, go ahead and get some in there. I would go to the bakeries and buy a ton of pastries because I had a pastry account that my dad set aside for me. Kind of. He did. So I felt obligated to eat everything. I'd get a baguette and maybe some ham from the store, and I would just eat off of that. And somebody gave me some honey. Eat off of that all day. Drink water. Jump in creeks. Massage my legs. And so that's some of the physical. The other part of the physical was I did a lot of self-talk. I probably don't recommend this kind of self-talk, but honesty. It kind of sounds like don't be a wimp, don't be a wimp, don't be a wimp. So like when I was like 17 miles into something, but still like 4 miles from a town and really worn out, just kind of each step, just telling yourself to be tougher. So that's how I would sometimes make it to the next town. I had days where I was where it rained the entire day. Hikers, I'm sure, experience that. And the sustaining part though, and that is similar to the flowers, where you are scouring, looking for something that will kind of reveal itself as something beautiful, and that could be moss on the back of a tree or the fox I saw. Well, just because this is probably the only time it would fit. So with these two knee braces on, and trekking poles, and reading glasses, sunglasses, headband, and headphones, and backpack, and kind of cowboy hat, I was not blending. And people would like stop what they were doing. Some would laugh. Some would just wait for me to pass before they resumed what they were doing. So that didn't have to do too much with what gave me strength, but that is just, that your pastor was out there and looked ridiculous. I've never not cared less, like how ridiculous I looked. I remember plopping down in the middle of Lausanne to work on my shoes and my backpack, kind of in the middle of a busy area. Like I was a homeless person, which there's nothing wrong with that, but I needed to stop and work on my boots. And I just like sat on the sidewalk, and it wasn't until I was sitting there that I was like, yeah, that's not a normal thing for me to do. And so being really okay with the purpose of the day. Ooh, that actually got me to something that was, that's super, okay, so this is, when you know exactly what you're doing for the day, man, that is fantastic, because I knew what I was doing. I got up, I faced a direction. If I got lost, I used the sun, and I walked that direction. Simplicity of purpose, or the singularity of purpose, as well. That's a way to kind of help us get into the sacred space when you have all these other things competing for your attention. Yep. Okay, it's time to wrap up here. So I think I'll end with the video of when the ibex almost ran me over. Although the ibex is not in the video, it is nonetheless entertaining. And it'll take me just a second to get to it. Well, can't find it, so I'm going to show you this one. This is walking up St. Bernard's Pass.
Let's walk together for a little bit.
If you get motion sickness,
I
you
know
might not
it's
want to
gonna
watch
bounce.
this.
Might not work. Oh, that's Julius Caesar's footprint right there. Napoleon. Guess what? He was not on a white horse. He was on a donkey.
Ooh, a little loud.
Yep. I wonder if this is a false summit. That would be a trip.
Oh, goodness. It was definitely a false summit. All right. Yeah, that's it. When it's not a Sunday school lesson, I'll show some other kind of funny. So I was definitely off the path there. It was a path, but I ended up near an alpine lake, and then somebody told me that you could go up over this other mountain to get to St. Bernard's Pass, which had like, ice and snow on it still because things weren't totally. But I went that route, and there's a video where I ran into some Swiss folks, and they start going, "What's over there?" And I'm like, and they were saying rock. And then you see this rock falling, like bounce like right past me. And they're like, I'm like, "Ew." Yeah. So anyways, that's a fun little video. I survived it. It was awesome. Grace, mercy, peace. I'm going to get ready for worship. But I want to close this with a brief prayer. Oh God, we give you thanks for this day, for our very breath, for thin spaces. We also give thanks that you are God with us in the thick places, that in all things, that neither life nor death, nor principalities or powers, nor rulers, nor angels, nor anything else in all of creation can separate us from you. Might that truth sustain us all of our days. In Christ's name, amen. All right, signing off.